Hey, Nick.
Hello, Warwick. Hello, listeners.
Howdy, listeners. Well, I'm a little apprehensive, Coxie.
Actually, I did do some deep research today, and as our listeners will be aware of, I don't normally do any research. I'm doing this in the last 53 seconds before we press record. But today I have researched. I felt I needed something in my arsenal. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Why are there no Irish lawyers?
No.
Because they can't pass the bar.
G'day, I'm Waz.
And I'm Nick, sometimes Coxie, mostly Nick.
This is the Tradies in Business podcast, and we're here to share a bunch of tips, ideas, tactics that you can put in place to get change happening in your trade business right now.
If you're really lucky, we're going to entertain you with a few mum jokes and, more importantly, a bunch of fantastic guests that will educate you in all things you need to know about trade business. But we do promise to do it with a whole bunch of fun along the way.
I'm a self-confessed idiot, so strap yourself in and enjoy another episode.
Oh my gosh. Righto. Might need a drink after that one. It should have been Australian lawyers.
Well, yes, that would be just as relevant, wouldn't it?
It's a bit of a toss-up as to the Aussies and the Irish back in the day. Who was the bigger drinkers? But drinking certainly won't help you with today's topic. That's my attempt at a segue.
That was pretty good.
Oh, thank you. It might accelerate the rate that things happen. But we're talking legal stuff today, and in particular, Coxie, something that does my head in after my years in financial planning and wealth coaching, the number of people I came across that had done nothing about the future. And, there's a 100% guarantee that we're all going to die. But so many people don't do any planning or forward thinking around it. So I'm fascinated to hear from our guest today, Vanessa Emilio. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's lovely
Pleasure
to
to have you.
be a bit of a morbid topic, but
And this
Oh, well, it's interesting though, because it's unavoidable and it's 100% guaranteed. It's one of the only things in life that is guaranteed. And yet so many people feel weird talking about it. It's not like it's a surprise, it's going to happen.
yeah, that's very true. And people don't plan for it. And that's the biggest problem. It's easy enough to plan for, and that's your downfall if you haven't planned for it.
It's very simple. And having had experience, I've actually been lucky to experience mostly where there's been preparation, but I have had the experience of once where there was no preparation, and it is a nightmare. It can be really
Yes.
challenging to navigate your way through the issues that come up after the fact, unfortunately. And you're not here for you to understand how challenging it is for those that are left behind. It can be really hard. But before we get too far into that, Vanessa, we love to hear about the people behind the podcast and what we're talking about today. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are?
I am originally Canadian, but I've lived in Australia longer than anywhere in
Wow.
certainly Canada. And I did law school here in Australia and never left because it's a fabulous country. And my background is law firms, large law firms, and investment banking, and the trustee companies. And so I went in-house after working in law firms because it was far more interesting. You have such a variety. You work with your clients are your colleagues, and it's much more interesting area. I found you never know what was going to be thrown at you. That's some people don't work well under that sort of scenario, but it's really fascinating the stuff that comes up day to day in corporates. And so I did that for about 15 years. And I had a number of people saying to me, oh, you know what? I've gone to lawyers and they're charging, $10,000 for this one small piece of work. It might be a will, it might be, terms because I'm starting my own business. And I just couldn't bear the thought of them paying that. And that's actually how Legal123 got started, because I ended up with these templates that I had done for friends and colleagues and family and that needed them. And just made it just should be affordable for everybody. And that's how it all started. So we were the first online law firm in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So it's been going for since 2009, so about 16 years.
Vanessa, do you think that the fear for fees, so we speak to lots of business owners that have found themselves in difficult positions, and they might talk to us reasonably early on, and our advice is nearly always get legal advice as early as possible. It costs you far less to do it early than it does once things get really complicated. And I feel like that could be a contributing factor to how many people don't get organized or forward think what might happen if they were to, when they, let's say it as it is, when they pass away. And so I wonder how much of that, though, is contributed to the fear around the fees or what might be payable if I have to put all these steps in place. Was that your experience? Was that some of the feedback you were getting?
Yeah, it would definitely. I think people think that lawyers are far more expensive than they are. They are if you're doing, very big deals or you're corporate. And there are some, I mean, like any profession, there's some good ones and there's some bad ones out there. And I think really people have that fear that they hear the word legal and costs and they think, oh my goodness, I'm running the other way. And they wait till the last minute, like you say, till something goes wrong before they do something about it. And that's much harder to clean up, costs much more money. And you end up, as the person who it's happened to, you end up, on a back foot. So it's, I think the second reason people don't plan ahead and don't think they need, and this is true for tradies or any business, they think, oh, I'll just give a quote and off we go and we do the work and we get paid and happy days. But the reality is there are a lot of people out there who will sadly, try to get around as much as they can, A, having any legal terms in place, and B, which scares me when you think there's something out there that could protect you and your business and your family. Just do it. And it's done.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of people out there who, they try to put blame on, it could be tradies or a business owner and they really, I think that's really unfortunate because they don't want to pay. They don't, and again, if you don't have any documents in place and you don't have any terms in place and you haven't planned, you have nowhere to go with that. And it's really difficult. And I think going to the will side of things and the planning for death, it's in the too hard category. That's the second part. It's not just the cost. People don't want to think about it. People don't want to. And I really think that's probably the second most common reason that I hear that people haven't done anything about it.
I just want to briefly speak to the cost things because we are talking to tradies and most of them are charging either a quoted rate or an hourly rate, which is no different than any kind of legal services, generally done around the same thing. There's some sort of rate per time block that needs to be paid. So if you just come at this from a common sense point of view, it's always going to cost less to do preventative work than it does to do work to fix an issue that has already arisen. So perhaps if I can put it back into their terminology here, you're paying an hourly rate or a fixed term rate. You're far better to do that work beforehand than, even if you have died, let's say something's happened to you, your family's left with that expense and that mess to try and fix the problem after. And I'm sure that's not something that any of us really intend to do.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I think people don't really realize about not having a will. When you don't have a will, just anybody, irrespective of whether you have a business or not, as soon as you don't have a will, yes, there is legislation in place that says, okay, the assets go first to the person you're married to, second to the children. There is a set way that assets are applied. What people don't realize is when you don't have a will, you need an executor. Somebody has to legally decide what happens. And so the state says, whoa, we've got some approved trustees, and the trustee companies charge an absolute fortune.
Yep.
And if you have a will and you've appointed an executor, it might be your partner, it might be, a family member. That's the role they're doing it, and they might be doing it normally they do it for free because you're giving them something out of your estate. But if you don't have a will, all of that has to be done by a public trustee, and the public trustees charge a percentage of your assets of your estate. So your family's paying out, or whoever is inheriting your estate is paying out a lot of money for something that they could be doing. And that's probably the first problem. And then the second problem is one that came up with one of our clients and has come up a few times since. And it was actually somebody who was provided trade services. And I received a call from his wife, and his wife was beside herself because he passed away suddenly, unexpectedly in an accident. And she needed to pay suppliers. She needed to pay bills. She had access to his accounts because she helped as an admin person, but he had not. He didn't have a will. He didn't have a power of attorney. So she could not pay his supply. She legally could not pay the suppliers. She legally could not do anything related to no subcontractors. She couldn't pay anybody. She also couldn't purchase anything to finish jobs that some of the subcontractors were working on. And then the third problem was, this was in WA. Even the speedy, where you apply to a court to be able to access and run the business, you need an emergency power of attorney is kind of the English language for it. That still was taking 8 to 12 weeks to get through the courts. And as a supplier of services, or if you're buying supplies, you don't have that luxury of 3 months to get this sorted. And she really, she tried everything to keep this business going. And she was really, she was lucky to get the power of attorney within 8 weeks. And that was a bit too late for a lot to save the business.
Wow. Yeah, it's I think it's easy just to not think about it, as you said, Vanessa, because for many of us it feels like a long way away, and it all feels complicated. What's some of the simple steps people can take? I mean, we've talked a bit about cost and some of the fear around that. Is it complicated? Is it, you talk about that example from the woman who lost her husband and the business has obviously suffered. How complicated would it have been to avoid that?
She could have done it in a day. They could have done it in a day together. So if he were still around, ideally he would have, irrespective, when you are a business owner and you have clients, those are assets, the client lists and, your relationship with your suppliers, and all that needs to be protected. And all they had to do was, first of all, have somebody he should have done a power of attorney, given a power of attorney to someone else to run his company. And that means access to bank accounts. That means, and you give a general power of attorney. It can take you 15 minutes to sort this out and have it there. Just have it on your files. And then in terms of the will side of things, that takes a little bit longer because you have to work out what your assets are. And you should have a list anyway when you're a business owner. You should know that what is worth selling and what is worth, if you're bringing on a partner, or if you're, whatever it might be, that's valuable. You've set that up. You've worked your, entire life, or your, a lot of your career setting up this business, no matter what it is, whether it's an electrical business, whether it's a plumbing business, those are your assets. And you don't want to walk away from it. Somebody else could slot in there if you want to retire, if you want to, if something happens to you and you have an accident, heaven forbid. But those are all assets, your client list, your suppliers, your supplies. You might have, a warehouse full of supplies. All those things are worth protecting. And if you have protection for that, it's worth making sure that you've planned ahead for that. What happens if? And the plan ahead is having a power of attorney, giving your partner, your wife, anybody, family member access just in case something happens. You pop it into your files, you save it for later, you make sure that they know about it or somebody knows where to find it. And then the second thing is, and this is really important, is to have a will too, so that the assets, because all of those, as I described, are assets of your business. That's like your house, like your business is like your house. It's an asset. And that should be given to somebody in your will. That's part of your estate. So those are two fundamental things that you could do. You could do it in a day. You could have it all sorted and stick it on your files and you're ready to go.
Vanessa, is there anything else that we need? I mean, they're two pretty fundamental things that everybody should have, whether they're a business owner or not. But given that business can be complicated, are there any other necessary steps we should be taking to protect our families should we pass away?
Well, the families should be somewhere involved in your business. So whether they want to run it or whether they don't, it should be really clear in your wishes, in your will, what you want done with that, what you want done with that business. Because there are also a lot of families who have the family, the one partner is out working, running the business, the other one is running the household or has another job and doesn't know anything about the business. And I know it sounds tedious to have a little compliance plan or a checklist, but something that makes it easy for somebody to come in and say, oh, this is where I find all these things, all your passwords. This is where I find, this is your bank accounts. Oh, I didn't know there was a separate one for a supplier. I didn't know there was a separate one. Because a lot of people don't even have bookkeepers. They run their own business. It's a little, off the cuff, back of the envelope kind of do the minimum.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but you still have a valuable business there. And how is your family going to know what it is and how to run it? So even just, a checklist or an agenda, or, I mean, some people don't like using computers, and have a book, have an agenda book and write down, okay, here's my client for the day. Here's the invoices. Have a system, some sort of system that makes it a little bit easy on your family. And I mean, I don't think that is the be all to end all, but again, the number of clients that we see that it's not that it's daunting to set up a business and it's daunting to run a business. But in my experience, a lot of people just want to do the work. They don't want the running of the business part. They don't want to have to worry about the quotes or the invoices or the tax stuff that goes with running a business. And you have to know what you're good at, and you have to know what you don't like doing. And if you don't like doing it, you should, there are lots of really inexpensive PAs out there. There's lots of bookkeepers, that everything can be done virtually too. You don't have to meet with anybody. But if you want to give them the shoebox full of your invoices, then, there's people out there that are willing to dig through them for you and set you up. But I think, that's the worst thing, again, you could do to your family. If there's an accident out there and you don't have the proper insurances, you've left your family with nothing but your business, and that's your asset. And at least make it easy on them to know what to do, where to go, and how to find things.
That's right.
We had an experience when one of our family members passed away, and they had their own individual, I think it was like 7 bank accounts, and there were insurances. There was just so much going on in the background, and it was so complicated to try and figure out where to go and what to look for, because there wasn't a system like you're talking about, Vanessa, that we've since implemented. So we have a lot of kids, but all of them are very aware where they find that kind of information. They know where the will is kept. They know what is to be done, so that everybody is already on the same page and they're understanding. My kids are adults, so these conversations are much easier than if you had little ones. Of course, you would involve them in that. But they also understand simple things like where my computer password is. So if they need to get in and answer emails or inform someone of what's going on, or they've had I don't know, insurances need to be paid or something needs to be done, they're able to access all of that information so that they as easily as possible, because I'm sure it's still very challenging, but as easily as possible, they've got that information at their fingertips. And I think they're just the simple steps that you don't think about until you've had that experience, which is why this is so important today for everybody to have the benefit of some experience, most definitely lots of your experience, Vanessa, but also you're looking at this from a pragmatic position that's not emotionally tied to where a business owner is currently at in their life. So you're able to give some great advice without all of the emotion that goes behind it.
Well, it's so traumatic when you lose your partner, a family member. I mean, it's traumatic enough to have them scrambling around trying to figure out what's going on. And I mean, that's partly what a will does. It forces you to sit down and list your assets. I mean, yes, some people say, oh, just everything goes to my partner, and they don't list their assets. But others, want to gift things. Perhaps you've got a business, my example before about the electrician, perhaps he wants to gift that to his sons, or perhaps he wants to, it's at least it forces you to sit down and think, what do I have? A lot of people don't think that about what they've got as assets. And they also don't think of their business as an asset. They just think, I go to work, I've got these people who call me, this is what I do, and that's it. So it's as I say, it forces you to sit down and think about what you want to happen to everything that you've worked for. And you've got a little bit of control over that, but it also gives guidance to your family and the people that you've left, the partners that are in your business, or that's really helpful. And I think it's really important.
So, sorry, Nick, so many tradies work so hard, and a lot of our tradiepreneur clients talk about leaving a legacy, and, they're trying to create something for their kids or their family. And it just makes sense to make sure that it goes to the right people in the right way, when it is time for us to shuffle off. So, for not a heck of a lot of money compared to what gets spent on accounting fees and all the other boring compliance stuff, you can have all this sorted and make sure that everything you've worked so hard for actually gets dealt with the way that you want.
Well, particularly if something unexpected happens and you just never know. I mean, you could be walking out the door and get hit by a car, touch would not. But, again, the tradies are exposed probably more than the rest of us who sit in an office to, potential issues and potential accidents. And at least, I mean, it's such a little thing, but you just don't think, gosh, what if something happened tomorrow? Nobody can run my business. Nobody can pay anybody. Nobody can, invoice people that owe us money. I mean, your family is, and this particular example that I had mentioned before, the client left a very young family, and the wife was beside herself, understandably, and could do nothing. They could do nothing for months. And, the business just, you can't survive for months without, she had no access to any income, nothing, because she wasn't working. So I think it's really can be, it can be quite scary for the people that are left behind. And I think, it's such a small thing to get done. Just sit down and do it. And
Just do it.
yeah. And I know it's one of those admin things that people say, they put it off and they think, oh, like you're saying, Oz, that you just don't really want to have to think about it. You think, oh yeah, maybe tomorrow, maybe never, 10 years from now, I'll think about it, but just have it there and stick it in your files and it's done.
So you have obviously made it easy for people to do this stuff, Vanessa, because I guess there's a number of ways people can take care of this stuff, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well. I've had clients say to us over the years, "Oh yeah, I've done one of those post office will kit things," and they feel like that's enough. That'll be fine. They'll take care of it all. And I wonder, obviously, you can't give legal advice for specifics on the show, but just generally speaking, I think like anything, there's a hierarchy of solutions and their appropriateness and effectiveness. What are your thoughts on that sort of, oh yeah, I wrote it on a piece of paper and stuck it in the filing cabinet. It says I give everything to, Marge. Um, is there a better solution, or is simple good? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, so I was fascinated when I was a law student 1 or 2 years ago, quite some time ago. It was a Brett Whiteley case. So Brett Whiteley was an Australian painter who passed away long before I was a lawyer. And he had written a number of wills and painted them on walls and wrote them. He had multiple because he had a mistress and he had his family. And so it was fascinating because the jury that was deciding who, it became a jury case because he had quite a few assets, and his paintings after he died, of course, were worth a lot more than when he was alive. And they dragged the jury around to his studio, and there was one painted on a wall. One of his wills was painted on a wall, and then there was another one that his wife had. And it was all to determine which one was the last one and what his wishes were. So that's kind of a quirky story to say it, if in the absence of anything, something written on toilet paper or the back of an envelope is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the analogy of where to start to answer your question.
Okay.
And then the next level up is obviously, there's free will kits out there. There's the post office ones. They're okay. Again, they're one step up from the toilet paper back of the envelope, painted on your wall, will. But, when you've got a business, again, just do it properly. Just have, so we've got different levels on ours. We've got a basic will kit, just so people will do something. So it's the $99 special DIY. And then we've got a specialist lawyer that you speak to. He finds out, what you've got, and he will write you a custom will. And then if it's more complex, you've got a blended family, and that causes issues in itself, because if you don't include people in your will that are entitled, so they might be kids that you haven't spoken to in years, they can contest it, and then it becomes messy and expensive. So there's different levels of things that you can do. But the first basic level is just get something done. And then the second level is do it properly. Have somebody help you do it. If you've got a business, you should have somebody help you do it, quite frankly. So the post office one just probably wouldn't cut it. It would probably cover your assets like your house and your car. But if you've got a business, it's a little bit more complex. You should at least make the effort and look after it. And that usually involves a conversation with a specialist estates lawyer. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive. I think our first level one, where you speak to we have a great wills and estates lawyer named David, and he moves mountains to do things for people that he doesn't charge enough for. But again, for $699, you can protect your company. That is far less and your family. And that's everything. He covers everything you need. And I just think, to me, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly. And maybe that's a legal thing. But again, who's left holding the bag but your family, trying to clean it up if you haven't dealt with it properly?
That's right.
So yes, it is something to have a post office will or a free will or a piece of paper with some wishes on it. But again, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly.
Vanessa, how often should we update our will?
Well, that's a really good question. If your executor dies, for example, that's a little bit of a problem. It usually wills are written generally enough so it covers new assets that you get. So if you bought another house or an investment property, it's usually covered. But if major events happen, you get divorced, you have more children, you should consider and you don't need a new will necessarily. You can do a codicil, and just that's like a little add-on bit that you sign and say, oh, by the way, got a new child and want to include them in this will. So it's a codicil is just like a little band-aid that you go, okay, going to pop that and add it onto my will and cover that side of things. But if something major happens in your life and you've got a new wife or a new family or a new business, you should do a new will. You shouldn't band-aid it.
Very good advice.
Vanessa, I have a question I'd like to ask our guests, and that is, if you had 1,000 trade business owners in a room, what's one piece of advice you'd like to leave them with?
Please, please have some legal terms. We just came up with a package for our tradies that includes the legal things that you need. And I don't think a lot of tradies realize how much legislation is around what they should have in their quote terms. So it's legislated what must be in your quotes. So even if you don't have terms, your quote terms are your terms. When you draw up that piece of paper that says this is how much the job is going to cost, there's actual legal requirements in every state that have to be abided by. So if you have a job that's more than $5,000, you must give something in writing to the person that you're doing the job for example. And there are lists of things that have to be included, your certification. And so that's the first part of the package. And then the second part is just a tack on of terms that you tack it on to your quote. And it says, you know, you owe us money at this time. It's protection for you, limitation of liability. And then another important part is the sign off. So when you finish the job and your client has said, well, that's a nice toilet you installed, you say to them, can you test it? Can you sign off on the work? So they can't call you back and say, you know, my daughter broke it, but it's your fault. You can come fix it for free. Just some protections like that. And so the piece of advice is, please have proper documentation in writing. It's so easy to do, and it's for all your clients, and it's for the protection of everybody. Just something that's legally binding.
It's such simple advice, Vanessa, and I know we've preached at our listeners and certainly our clients many, many, many times over the years, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so, Coxie.
Absolutely.
But just, yeah, sometimes those simple things can avoid so much heartache. So it's been fantastic chatting with you today, Vanessa. Yeah. Now, if people are listening and they want to find out more about you and the services you offer, Vanessa, what's the best place for them to do that?
We are legal123.com.au. And if you go to legal123.com.au/tradies, which the page will be up in 24 hours, there's a little package and some info. And we can, if you pop us a note and say that you saw us on or you listened to the podcast, we'll give a discount too. So that's a way of getting people to please get some terms. I really want to promote you getting terms in place. It's not about the sales, it's about protection. And I think that's really, so whether it's the tradies package or whether it's the will, we're happy to give a discount. So
love it.
Wonderful.
Love it.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Pop all that in the show notes, and thanks heaps for your time, Vanessa. Enjoy the cold weather.
It's been lovely speaking to you both.
Likewise. Thanks, Vanessa.